Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her friends spent afternoons gossiping about boys and shopping for the latest fashions, Sarah found herself drawn to the roar of engines and the gleaming metal of aircraft. Her father, a mechanic at the local airport, had unknowingly planted the seed of her passion when he first took her to work as a 7-year-old girl. The year was 1952, and women were expected to follow traditional paths. Marriage, children, and keeping house were considered the pinnacle of female achievement. But Sarah's heart belonged to the sky. She spent countless hours at the airport, watching planes take off and land, studying their movements, and dreaming of the day she might pilot one herself. Her mother, Elena, worried constantly about Sarah's unusual interests. "Mija, you need to focus on finding a good husband," she would say, shaking her head as Sarah returned home with grease under her fingernails and stories of the day's flights. Flying is men's work. It's dangerous and no place for a young lady. But Sarah's father, Roberto, saw something special in his daughter's determination. He had watched her fix a broken radio when she was just 12 years old, working with the patience and precision of someone twice her age. When she announced her intention to learn to fly, he didn't laugh like the other men at the airport. Instead, he quietly began setting aside money for flying lessons. The local flight instructor, Captain William Hayes, was a former World War II pilot who had seen enough combat to last several lifetimes. His weathered face and stern demeanor intimidated most people, but Sarah saw past his rough exterior to the skilled aviator beneath. When she approached him about lessons, his initial reaction was predictable. "Flying isn't a hobby for young ladies," he told her bluntly. "It requires strength, quick thinking, and nerves of steel. The cockpit of an aircraft is no place for someone who might panic or freeze up when things go wrong." Sarah stood her ground, her dark eyes flashing with determination. "Sir, I've been around airplanes my entire life. I know every bolt and wire on a Cessna 172, and I can spot mechanical problems that some of your male students miss completely. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for the same chance you'd give any serious student." Captain Hayes studied her for a long moment, noting the grease stains on her work clothes and the confident way she spoke about aircraft mechanics. Against his better judgment, and perhaps influenced by her father's reputation as an honest man, he agreed to give her a trial lesson. That first flight changed everything for Sarah. As the small aircraft lifted off the runway, she felt a sense of freedom and purpose she had never experienced before. The earth fell away beneath them, and suddenly the limitations and expectations that had always surrounded her seemed as distant as the ground below. She had found her calling, and nothing would deter her from pursuing it. Captain Hayes was impressed despite himself. Sarah's natural instincts in the cockpit were remarkable for a first-time student. She listened carefully to instructions, responded quickly to changing conditions, and showed an intuitive understanding of how the aircraft moved through the air. By the end of the lesson, he knew he was looking at someone with genuine talent. Word of Sarah's flying lessons spread quickly through the small community. Some people were merely curious about the young woman who dared to challenge convention. Others were openly critical, viewing her ambitions as inappropriate and potentially dangerous. The local newspaper even ran a small article about her, describing her as the girl who thinks she can fly. Sarah's resolve only strengthened in the face of criticism. She threw herself into her studies, learning everything she could about aerodynamics, weather patterns, and navigation. She spent her free time at the airport, helping with maintenance work and observing experienced pilots. Her dedication was total and unwavering. The other student pilots at the airport had mixed reactions to her presence. Some were supportive, recognizing her skill and determination. Others resented what they saw as an intrusion into their masculine domain. A few made crude jokes about women pilots, but Sarah learned to ignore their comments and focus on her training. As weeks turned into months, Sarah's progress was undeniable. She soloed earlier than most students and consistently performed well on both written and practical examinations. Captain Hayes found himself becoming protective of his unusual student, impressed not only by her flying ability but by her character and perseverance. The day Sarah earned her private pilot's license, her father stood on the tarmac with tears in his eyes, watching his daughter taxi the aircraft after her successful check ride. She had achieved something remarkable, becoming one of the youngest licensed female pilots in the state of Texas, but this was only the beginning of her journey. Sarah's ultimate goal was not simply to fly for recreation. She dreamed of a career in aviation, of breaking barriers and proving that women could be just as capable as men in the cockpit of any aircraft. She had heard stories of female pilots during the war who had ferried military aircraft and served with distinction, and she wanted to follow in their footsteps. The challenges ahead would be far greater than anything she had faced during her initial training. The aviation industry in the 1950s was overwhelmingly male-dominated, and opportunities for women were scarce. But Sarah Martinez had learned that determination and skill could overcome even the most entrenched prejudices. She was ready for whatever lay ahead. 2 years after earning her private pilot's license, Sarah had accumulated over 500 flight hours and earned her commercial rating. Her skills were undeniable, and even the most skeptical pilots at the airport had grudgingly admitted she was among the best they had seen. But translating her abilities into employment opportunities proved to be an entirely different challenge. The major airlines wouldn't even consider her application. Personnel managers would take one look at her name, realize she was a woman, and politely but firmly explain that they only hired male pilots. Some were more direct in their rejection, stating outright that passengers would never feel safe with a woman at the controls of a commercial aircraft. Sarah faced rejection after rejection, but she refused to give up. She applied to cargo companies, charter services, and even crop dusting operations. The responses were always the same: thanks but no thanks. The aviation industry, it seemed, had no place for someone like her regardless of her qualifications. During this frustrating period, Sarah heard about an opportunity that seemed too good to be true. The military was conducting a special demonstration flight program, showcasing new aircraft technology to government officials and potential international buyers. They needed experienced pilots to demonstrate various aircraft capabilities, and the pay was excellent. The program was being coordinated by Colonel James Mitchell, a decorated Air Force officer who had served with distinction in both World War II and Korea. When Sarah submitted her application, she made sure to highlight her experience and qualifications without initially mentioning her gender. Her resume was impressive enough to earn her an interview. Colonel Mitchell was surprised when Sarah walked into his office for the interview. He had expected someone named S. Martinez to be a man, and his facial expression made his assumption clear. However, he was too professional to dismiss her outright, and he proceeded with the interview as planned. Sarah answered every technical question flawlessly, demonstrated extensive knowledge of aircraft systems, and presented herself with the confidence of an experienced aviator. Colonel Mitchell found himself impressed despite his initial reservations. Her qualifications were superior to many of the male pilots he had already interviewed. After a thorough discussion of her experience and a review of her flight records, Colonel Mitchell made an unexpected decision. He would give her a chance, but there was one condition. She would have to prove herself in a practical flying test that would be more demanding than anything required of the other candidates. The test flight took place on a crisp autumn morning at Edwards Air Force Base in California. Sarah was required to demonstrate her proficiency in a high-performance military aircraft, executing complex maneuvers that would challenge even seasoned pilots. She approached the challenge with her characteristic determination and focus. The aircraft was a modified T-33 jet trainer, far more advanced than anything Sarah had previously flown. The cockpit was cramped and filled with unfamiliar instruments, but she quickly adapted to the new environment. Her years of studying aircraft systems and her natural piloting instincts served her well. During the flight, she was required to perform precision formation flying, high-speed passes, and emergency procedures. Each maneuver was executed flawlessly, demonstrating not only her technical skill but also her ability to remain calm under pressure. The test pilots observing from the ground were clearly impressed by her performance. When Sarah landed after the grueling 2-hour test flight, Colonel Mitchell was waiting on the tarmac. His expression had changed from skepticism to genuine respect. She had not only met the requirements but had exceeded them, performing better than several of the male pilots who had taken the same test. "Miss Martinez," he said as she climbed down from the cockpit, "that was exceptional flying. I have to admit I had my doubts about bringing a woman into this program, but your performance today proves that skill and competence have nothing to do with gender." Sarah felt a surge of pride and relief. Finally, Someone in a position of authority had recognized her abilities and was willing to give her a real opportunity. She would be part of the demonstration team, flying alongside some of the most experienced military pilots in the country. However, her celebration was short-lived. Within days of being accepted into the program, Sarah received a phone call that would devastate her hopes. A senior Pentagon official had learned about her participation and had personally intervened to remove her from the team. "I'm sorry, Miss Martinez," Colonel Mitchell explained during their difficult conversation. "The decision came from the highest levels. They're concerned about the political implications of having a female pilot in such a visible role. The demonstration flights will include foreign dignitaries and government officials, and they feel it would send the wrong message about American military capabilities." Sarah felt as though she had been punched in the stomach. Once again, her gender had become an insurmountable obstacle regardless of her proven abilities. The rejection was particularly painful because she had come so close to achieving her goal, only to have it snatched away by bureaucratic prejudice. The conversation with Colonel Mitchell continued for nearly an hour, as he tried to explain the political realities of the situation while expressing his personal regret about the decision. He assured her that the rejection had nothing to do with her flying ability or professionalism, but Sarah knew that such distinctions provided little comfort. "Is there anything I can do?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer.
"Can I appeal this decision or speak to someone higher up the chain of command?"
Colonel Mitchell shook his head sadly. "The decision is final, and it came from people who outrank me by several levels. I wish I could offer you some hope, but the military has made its position clear. They're not ready for female pilots in combat or demonstration roles." As Sarah hung up the phone, she felt a familiar mixture of anger and determination. This latest setback was more painful than the others, because she had briefly glimpsed what success might look like. But she had not come this far to give up now, regardless of how many doors were slammed in her face. Unknown to Sarah, her story was about to take an unexpected turn. The same qualities that had impressed Colonel Mitchell would soon catch the attention of someone with the power and influence to change her life forever. Sometimes the most important opportunities come from the most unexpected sources, and Sarah's persistence was about to pay off in ways she could never have imagined. 3 months after her crushing disappointment with the military demonstration program, Sarah was working as a flight instructor at a small airport outside San Antonio. It wasn't the career she had dreamed of, but it allowed her to stay connected to aviation while paying her bills. Her students were mostly wealthy businessmen learning to fly for pleasure, and while the work was steady, it felt like a step backward from her larger ambitions. One particularly hot Tuesday afternoon, Sarah was reviewing flight plans in the airport office when the telephone rang. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, and completely unexpected. The caller identified himself as Captain Robert Sterling, chief pilot for Meridian Industries, one of the largest aerospace companies in the country. "Miss Martinez," Captain Sterling said, "I understand you were recently involved in the military demonstration program at Edwards Air Force Base. Colonel Mitchell spoke very highly of your abilities, and I'd like to discuss a potential opportunity with our company." Sarah's heart began to race. Meridian Industries was a major player in the aerospace industry, involved in everything from commercial aircraft development to government contracts. The company had a reputation for innovation and had been responsible for several breakthrough designs in military and civilian aviation. Captain Sterling explained that Meridian was developing a new experimental aircraft and needed test pilots with exceptional skills and unquestioned integrity. The project was highly classified, involving advanced technology that could revolutionize both military and civilian aviation. They were looking for pilots who could handle complex flight testing while maintaining absolute secrecy about the program's details. "I won't lie to you, Miss Martinez," Captain Sterling continued. "This position would involve significant risks. Test flying experimental aircraft is dangerous work, and we've lost pilots before. But the compensation is excellent, and you'd be working with some of the most advanced aircraft technology in the world." Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing. After months of rejection and disappointment, someone was offering her exactly the kind of opportunity she had been seeking. The fact that it involved experimental aircraft made it even more appealing, as she had always been fascinated by cutting-edge aviation technology. The interview process was unlike anything Sarah had experienced before. She was required to undergo extensive background checks, psychological evaluations, and additional flight testing. The company's security procedures were more stringent than those of many government agencies, reflecting the sensitive nature of their work. During her visit to Meridian's sprawling facility in Nevada, Sarah was impressed by the scale and sophistication of their operations. The company employed thousands of engineers, technicians, and pilots, all working on projects that pushed the boundaries of what was possible in aviation. The aircraft hangars contained prototypes that looked like something from science fiction movies. Her flying evaluation took place in a modified fighter aircraft that had been stripped of its weapon systems and equipped with experimental avionics. The test was designed to evaluate not only her flying skills, but also her ability to adapt quickly to unfamiliar aircraft and systems. Sarah's years of experience with diverse aircraft types served her well during the challenging evaluation. Dr. Elizabeth Hammond, Meridian's chief aerospace engineer, observed the flight test from the ground. As one of the few women in senior positions at the company, Dr. Hammond understood the challenges Sarah had faced in her career. She was impressed by Sarah's technical knowledge and her ability to provide detailed feedback about the aircraft's performance characteristics. "She has excellent instincts," Dr. Hammond told Captain Sterling after reviewing the test results. "Her understanding of flight dynamics is sophisticated, and she communicates observations clearly and precisely. Those are exactly the qualities we need in a test pilot." Within a week of her evaluation, Sarah received a formal job offer from Meridian Industries. The salary was more than double what she had been earning as a flight instructor, and the opportunity to work with experimental aircraft was beyond her wildest dreams. She accepted immediately, knowing that this position could be the breakthrough she had been working toward for years. Her first assignment involved testing modifications to an experimental cargo aircraft designed for high-altitude operations. The aircraft incorporated revolutionary engine technology and advanced materials that had never been used in production aircraft. Sarah's job was to evaluate the aircraft's performance under various conditions and provide detailed reports on its capabilities and limitations. The work was indeed dangerous, as Captain Sterling had warned. Experimental aircraft were unpredictable, and even routine test flights could quickly become emergency situations. Sarah encountered engine failures, electrical malfunctions, and control problems that would have terrified less experienced pilots. But her years of training and her natural calm under pressure served her well. Her colleagues at Meridian were initially skeptical about working with a female test pilot. The aviation industry, even at the cutting edge of technology, remained predominantly male. However, Sarah's professionalism and competence quickly earned their respect. She approached each assignment with meticulous preparation and attention to detail that impressed even the most experienced pilots. 6 months into her tenure at Meridian, Sarah was assigned to a project that would change the trajectory of her career entirely. The company had been selected to develop a prototype for a new presidential transport aircraft, a highly classified project that involved the highest levels of government security. The aircraft would incorporate the most advanced technology available, designed to provide unparalleled safety and capability for transporting the nation's top officials. The project, codenamed Eagle One, was personally overseen by senior Pentagon officials and required security clearances that took months to obtain. Sarah found herself working alongside pilots who had flown combat missions in multiple wars and engineers who had designed some of the most famous aircraft in aviation history. The lead test pilot for certain phases of the Eagle One project, Sarah was responsible for evaluating systems that had never been tested in actual flight conditions. The work required not only exceptional flying skills but also the ability to make split-second decisions that could affect the success of the entire program. Her performance on the Eagle One project brought Sarah to the attention of officials at the highest levels of government. Her test reports were being read by cabinet members and senior military commanders, people who had the power to influence the future of American aviation. Unknown to Sarah, her work was creating ripples that would soon reach the very top of the government hierarchy. The stage was being set for an encounter that would validate everything Sarah had worked for and prove that excellence in aviation knew no gender boundaries. Her journey from small-town flight instructor to test pilot for the most sensitive government projects was about to culminate in a moment that would change not only her life but also perceptions about women in aviation. The morning of March 15, 1955, dawned clear and cold at the classified testing facility in Nevada. Sarah had been working on the Eagle One project for 8 months, and today marked a crucial milestone: the first flight test of the fully integrated presidential transport prototype. The aircraft represented the pinnacle of American aerospace technology, incorporating innovations that would not be seen in commercial aviation for decades. Sarah arrived at the facility before sunrise, as was her habit on important test days. She spent hours reviewing flight plans, weather reports, and system specifications. Every detail had to be perfect when testing aircraft intended for the highest levels of government service. The responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders, but she had earned her position through exceptional performance and unwavering dedication. As she conducted her pre-flight inspection of the Eagle One prototype, Sarah noticed unusual activity around the facility. Additional security personnel had arrived overnight, and several black sedans with government license plates were parked near the main hangar. She assumed this increased security was related to the importance of the day's test flight, but she would soon learn the situation was far more complex. Captain Sterling approached her as she completed her inspection checklist. His expression was tense, and Sarah could tell immediately that something was wrong. "Miss Martinez," he said quietly, "we have a situation that's going to require some delicate handling. I need you to be prepared for some unexpected complications today." Before Sarah could ask for clarification, a group of men in dark suits emerged from the main administrative building. Leading the group was General Harrison Clark, a Pentagon official she recognized from briefings but had never met personally. His reputation was formidable. He was known throughout the military as a man who demanded absolute compliance with regulations and had little tolerance for deviation from established procedures. "General," Clark approached Sarah with a stern expression that immediately put her on guard. "Miss Martinez, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding about today's flight test. We've just learned that there will be high-level government observers present, including cabinet members and foreign dignitaries. Under these circumstances, we cannot proceed with a civilian pilot at the controls." Sarah felt her stomach drop, but she maintained her composure. "Sir, I've been the lead test pilot on this project for months. I know this aircraft better than anyone else on the team. My civilian status hasn't been an issue for any of the previous test flights." The general's expression remained unchanging. Previous test flights didn't involve this level of government scrutiny. Today's demonstration is being conducted for officials who will determine whether this aircraft design moves forward to production. We cannot risk any appearance of impropriety or lack of military precision. Captain Sterling stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "General Clark, with respect, Miss Martinez has performed flawlessly on this project. Her test reports have been exemplary, and she has more flight time in this particular aircraft than any of our military pilots. Replacing her at this stage could actually increase the risk of complications." The general turned his attention to Captain Sterling with obvious irritation. "Captain, you seem to be missing the point. This is not about Miss Martinez's qualifications or performance. This is about maintaining proper protocol when dealing with sensitive government operations. Civilian contractors have their place, but that place is not in the pilot's seat during high-visibility demonstrations." Sarah realized that arguing with General Clark would be futile and potentially damaging to her career. However, she also understood that this moment represented something larger than just a single test flight. The dismissal of her role seemed to reflect the broader challenges faced by women in aviation, regardless of their qualifications or achievements. "General," she said calmly, "I understand your concerns about protocol. However, I believe the success of this mission should be the primary consideration. I've invested months in learning the specific characteristics of this aircraft, and I'm confident in my ability to demonstrate its capabilities effectively." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another official car, this one flying small flags that indicated the presence of a very senior government figure. General Clark immediately straightened his posture and adjusted his uniform, clearly recognizing the significance of the new arrival. From the car emerged Admiral Thomas Richardson, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and one of the most powerful military leaders in the country. His presence at the facility was unexpected and immediately changed the dynamics of the situation. Admiral Richardson was known for his pragmatic approach to military affairs and his focus on results rather than politics. Admiral Richardson surveyed the group gathered around the aircraft, his experienced eyes taking in every detail. His gaze lingered on Sarah for a moment, noting her flight suit and the confidence with which she carried herself. He had been briefed about the Eagle One project, but had not expected to encounter any controversy about the day's test pilot. General Clark, Admiral Richardson said in his distinctive gravelly voice, "I hope you're not planning to make any last-minute changes to today's flight operations. I've traveled a long way to observe this demonstration, and I expect to see the aircraft performed by the pilot who knows it best." General Clark appeared uncomfortable as he explained his concerns about having a civilian pilot conduct such an important demonstration. He emphasized the potential political implications and the need to maintain proper military protocol in front of international observers. Admiral Richardson listened patiently to the general's explanation, occasionally nodding but showing no indication of his thoughts. When General Clark finished speaking, the admiral turned his attention to Sarah. "Miss Martinez, I've read your test reports on this aircraft. Your technical knowledge and flying ability are clearly exceptional. How do you assess the readiness of this aircraft for today's demonstration?" Sarah appreciated the admiral's direct approach and responded with the same level of professionalism. "Sir, the aircraft is performing within all specified parameters. We've resolved the minor control sensitivity issues identified in previous flights, and all systems are functioning optimally. I'm confident we can demonstrate its full capabilities safely and effectively." The admiral's expression remained neutral, but Sarah sensed that he was evaluating not just her words but her overall demeanor and confidence. After a moment of consideration, he made a decision that surprised everyone present. "General Clark, I understand your concerns about protocol, but I'm more interested in seeing this aircraft demonstrated by the pilot who knows it best. Miss Martinez will conduct today's flight as originally planned. If anyone has concerns about this decision, they can discuss them with me after the demonstration." The authority in Admiral Richardson's voice made it clear that his decision was final. General Clark's expression showed his displeasure, but he was too experienced to argue with someone of the admiral's rank and influence. The other officials present seemed relieved that the matter had been resolved so decisively. As the group dispersed to prepare for the morning's activities, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. She had won this particular battle, but she knew that her performance during the demonstration would be scrutinized more closely than ever before. The eyes of some of the most powerful people in the government would be upon her, and any mistake could have far-reaching consequences for her career and for other women seeking opportunities in aviation. 2 hours after Admiral Richardson's decisive intervention, Sarah found herself strapping into the cockpit of the Eagle One prototype while dozens of the most important people in American government and defense watched from the observation platform. The morning sun had burned off the desert haze, creating perfect conditions for the demonstration flight that would determine the future of the most advanced aircraft ever built. The cockpit of the Eagle One was a masterpiece of engineering, filled with instruments and controls that represented years of research and development. Sarah had spent hundreds of hours in this exact seat, but today felt different. Every switch, every gauge, every system carried the weight of not just her own reputation, but the future of women in aviation. She could feel the eyes of the observers upon her, some supportive, others skeptical, all waiting to see what she could accomplish. Captain Sterling's voice crackled through her headset as he conducted the final communications check from the control tower. "Eagle One, this is Tower Control. All systems show green across the board. Weather conditions are optimal and the test range is clear. You are cleared for the full demonstration profile at your discretion." Sarah responded with the professionalism that had become her trademark. "Tower Control, Eagle One ready for departure. Beginning demonstration sequence in accordance with approved flight plan. Estimated duration 90 minutes with full systems evaluation." As she taxied the massive aircraft toward the runway, Sarah could see the observation platform filled with dignitaries. Admiral Richardson stood at the center of the group, his expression unreadable as he watched the aircraft approach the takeoff position. General Clark was visible nearby, clearly still unhappy about the decision to proceed with a civilian pilot, but maintaining military discipline in the presence of his superiors. The Eagle 1 prototype was unlike any aircraft Sarah had previously flown. Its engines produced tremendous power while operating with remarkable smoothness, and its advanced flight control systems responded to pilot inputs with precision that bordered on telepathic. During months of testing, she had pushed this aircraft to its limits and had developed an intimate understanding of its capabilities and characteristics. The takeoff was flawless, with the massive aircraft lifting off the runway with surprising grace despite its size and weight. Sarah felt the familiar surge of exhilaration that came with piloting a truly exceptional machine, but she forced herself to maintain complete focus on the demonstration requirements. Every maneuver had been planned to showcase specific capabilities that would be critical for presidential transport operations. The first phase of the demonstration involved high-speed flight at various altitudes, testing the aircraft's performance envelope under conditions that simulated long-distance travel requirements. Sarah smoothly transitioned through different flight regimes, monitoring engine performance and system responses, while maintaining constant communication with ground control. Tower control. Eagle 1 beginning high-altitude cruise evaluation, climbing to flight level 400 for maximum range configuration testing. All systems nominal. Performance exceeding design specifications by 3%. Dr. Hammond's voice joined the radio conversation from the engineering station. Eagle 1, we're seeing excellent data on all monitored systems. Engine temperatures are optimal, and fuel consumption is tracking slightly better than predicted. You're cleared to proceed with the maneuverability demonstration. The maneuverability phase of the test required Sarah to execute a series of complex flight patterns that would prove the aircraft's agility despite its large size. These maneuvers were designed to simulate evasive actions that might be necessary if the presidential transport ever faced hostile threats. The demonstration required precise control inputs and perfect timing to avoid exceeding structural limits while showcasing maximum capability. Sarah rolled the massive aircraft into a steep bank, feeling the G-forces press her into her seat as she executed a high-speed turn that would have been impossible in conventional transport aircraft. The Eagle 1 responded beautifully, its advanced control systems automatically adjusting to maintain optimal performance throughout the maneuver. From the observation platform, even the most skeptical observers were impressed by the aircraft's performance. The combination of size, speed, and agility was unprecedented in aviation history. Admiral Richardson nodded approvingly as he watched the aircraft execute maneuvers that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The most challenging portion of the demonstration involved testing the aircraft's defensive systems, including electronic countermeasures and advanced navigation equipment designed to operate in hostile environments. Sarah activated various systems while maintaining precise flight control, demonstrating that the aircraft could perform complex defensive actions without compromising its primary mission of safe transport. Eagle 1, beginning electronic systems evaluation, activating full defensive suite while maintaining standard flight profile. This will test integration between flight controls and defensive electronics. The aircraft's response to the system's activation was immediate and dramatic. Electronic displays throughout the cockpit came alive with data streams, while automated systems began conducting simulated defensive maneuvers. Sarah's job was to maintain stable flight while the aircraft's computers evaluated threats and responses that existed only in the test scenario. Suddenly, warning lights began flashing throughout the cockpit as one of the aircraft's primary electrical systems experienced an unexpected malfunction. This was not part of the planned demonstration, and Sarah immediately recognized that she was facing a genuine emergency situation with dozens of high-level officials watching her every move. The electrical failure had knocked out several critical flight instruments and compromised some of the aircraft's automated systems. Sarah quickly switched to backup instruments while running through emergency procedures that she had practiced countless times during training simulations. Her years of experience with challenging aircraft and emergency situations proved invaluable as she calmly diagnosed the problem and implemented solutions. Tower control. Eagle 1 experiencing partial electrical failure, switching to backup systems and beginning emergency descent to ensure safe landing. All personnel remain secure. Situation is manageable with current backup systems operational. Captain Sterling's voice reflected concern but confidence in Sarah's abilities. Eagle 1, tower control confirms emergency procedures. Emergency crews are standing by, but we show your backup systems are fully functional. cleared for immediate return and approach to primary runway. The emergency landing required Sarah to fly the massive aircraft using only backup instruments and manual control systems. The sophisticated computer assistance that made the Eagle One so advanced was no longer available, forcing her to rely entirely on her own piloting skills and knowledge of the aircraft's fundamental flight characteristics. As she guided the aircraft through its approach, Sarah could feel the weight of responsibility more heavily than ever before. This was exactly the kind of situation that critics would use to justify excluding women from critical aviation roles. Any mistake or sign of panic would be magnified and remembered far longer than her months of successful test flights. The landing was executed with textbook precision, the aircraft touching down smoothly despite the loss of several electronic systems. Sarah brought the massive machine to a stop at the end of the runway, where emergency crews were waiting to evaluate the extent of the electrical problems. As she shut down the engines and completed her post-flight checklist, she could see vehicles racing across the tarmac from the observation platform. Admiral Richardson was among the first to reach the aircraft, his expression showing both relief and admiration for the way Sarah had handled the emergency. As she climbed down from the cockpit, he approached her with the kind of respect that is reserved for aviators who have proven themselves under the most demanding circumstances. As Sarah stepped down from the Eagle One prototype, her flight suit damp with perspiration from the intense concentration required during the emergency landing, she was immediately surrounded by engineers, technicians, and officials who had witnessed her masterful handling of a potentially catastrophic situation. The electrical failure had been completely unexpected, and her calm, professional response had prevented what could have been a disaster for both the aircraft and the prestigious demonstration. Admiral Richardson approached her with a measured stride, his weathered face showing the kind of respect that combat veterans reserve for those who have proven themselves under fire. Behind him came Dr. Hammond, Captain Sterling, and surprisingly, General Clark, whose expression had transformed from skepticism to grudging admiration. "Miss Martinez," Admiral Richardson said, extending his hand in a gesture that immediately caught the attention of everyone present. That was exceptional airmanship under extremely challenging circumstances. I've seen military pilots with decades of experience handle similar emergencies with less skill and composure than you demonstrated today. Sarah accepted the handshake, noting the firm grip and the direct eye contact that conveyed genuine respect. "Thank you, Admiral." The aircraft performed well despite the electrical problems. The backup systems functioned exactly as designed, which allowed for a safe resolution of the situation. Dr. Hammond stepped forward, her excitement barely contained as she began discussing the technical aspects of the emergency. "Sarah, the way you diagnosed and responded to the electrical failure was textbook perfect. You identified the primary system failure within seconds and transitioned to backup controls without any loss of aircraft stability. The data we recorded will be invaluable for improving our emergency procedures." General Clark, who had been notably silent since Admiral Richardson's arrival, finally spoke up. His voice carried a tone that Sarah had never heard from him before, one that suggested a fundamental shift in his perception of her capabilities. "Miss Martinez, I owe you an apology," he said, his military bearing evident even in this moment of personal admission. "My concerns about your participation in today's demonstration were based on protocol considerations that now seem entirely irrelevant. What I witnessed today was piloting of the highest caliber, regardless of whether you wear a military uniform or not." The group of foreign observers and government officials who had been watching from the platform began gathering around the aircraft, their conversations animated as they discussed what they had witnessed. Sarah could hear fragments of their discussions, and it was clear that the emergency landing had actually enhanced rather than diminished their impression of the aircraft and its capabilities. A distinguished gentleman with a slight European accent approached the group and introduced himself as Minister Wilhelm Hartmann from the German Defense Ministry. His government had been considering purchasing a modified version of the Eagle One for their own head of state transport needs, and today's demonstration had been crucial to their decision-making process. "Miss Martinez," Minister Hartmann said with formal courtesy, "I must tell you that your handling of today's emergency has been most impressive. In my country, we have experienced military pilots, but few who could have managed such a situation with your level of skill and calm. This aircraft, flown by pilots of your caliber, would indeed provide the highest level of safety for critical transport missions. Sarah was surprised to find herself in conversation with international officials about matters of such importance. 6 months earlier, she had been teaching weekend flying lessons to businessmen, and now she was discussing advanced aircraft capabilities with defense ministers and military leaders from around the world. Captain Sterling approached with a technical team that had been analyzing the aircraft's systems to determine the cause of the electrical failure. His expression was serious, but Sarah could tell that the news was not entirely negative. The preliminary analysis shows that the electrical failure was caused by a manufacturing defect in one of the primary power distribution units, he explained. It's the kind of problem that could have occurred at any time, and actually, it's better that we discovered it during testing rather than during operational service. Your response prevented any damage to the aircraft or its systems. Admiral Richardson nodded approvingly at this information. So this emergency actually validates the aircraft's design philosophy. The backup systems performed exactly as intended, and pilot skill was able to compensate for the primary system failure. That's precisely what we need in a presidential transport aircraft. As the crowd of officials and technicians began to disperse, Admiral Richardson asked Sarah to accompany him for a private conversation. They walked toward a quiet area near the hangar, away from the bustle of post-flight analysis and debriefing activities. Miss Martinez, the Admiral began, I want you to know that today's performance has been noted at the highest levels of government. Your work on this project has been exemplary from the beginning, but your handling of today's emergency demonstrates the kind of professionalism and skill that we need in our most critical aviation operations. Sarah felt a surge of pride but maintained her professional demeanor. Thank you, Admiral. This project has been the most challenging and rewarding work of my career. The opportunity to contribute to such an important program has been an honor. Admiral Richardson studied her for a moment before continuing. I'm going to be direct with you about something. There are people in Washington who have been following your work on this project, people who make decisions about the future of American aviation. Today's demonstration is going to open doors that have been closed to civilian pilots, particularly women, for far too long. The implications of his words were not lost on Sarah. Throughout her career, she had faced barriers that had nothing to do with her qualifications or abilities. The idea that her work might help other women overcome similar obstacles was both exciting and daunting. I understand the broader significance of what happened today, Sarah replied. If my work helps prove that competence and professionalism are more important than traditional assumptions about who can or should fly certain types of aircraft, then today will have been meaningful beyond just the technical success of the Eagle One program. The Admiral smiled, the first time Sarah had seen him display such warmth. You have exactly the right attitude. Excellence speaks for itself regardless of who achieves it. Today you proved that the best pilot for any mission is simply the best pilot, period. As they walked back toward the main group, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From her first flying lesson in small-town Texas to this conversation with one of the most powerful military leaders in the country, every challenge and setback had contributed to her development as an aviator and as a person. The day was far from over, as extensive debriefing sessions and technical analysis would continue for hours. But Sarah knew that something fundamental had changed. The respect she had earned today was based purely on her performance under pressure, and that respect would be the foundation for whatever opportunities lay ahead in her aviation career. Unknown to Sarah, the events of this day were being carefully observed by someone whose opinion would matter more than any other, someone who would soon have the power to change not just her career, but the entire landscape of opportunities for women in American aviation. 3 weeks after the Eagle One demonstration, Sarah was working in her office at the Meridian facility when Captain Sterling appeared at her door with an expression she had never seen before. His usually composed demeanor showed signs of barely contained excitement, mixed with something that might have been awe. Sarah, he said, closing the door behind him. I need you to sit down. What I'm about to tell you is going to change everything you thought you knew about the reach and importance of your work on this project. Sarah set down the technical report she had been reviewing and gave Captain Sterling her full attention. Over the months they had worked together, she had learned to recognize when he had genuinely significant news to share. The White House called this morning, he began, pausing to let the weight of those words sink in. President Eisenhower has personally requested to meet with you. Apparently, Admiral Richardson briefed him about the Eagle One demonstration, and the president wants to discuss the future of the presidential transport program directly with the pilot who knows the aircraft best. Sarah felt as though the air had been knocked out of her lungs. The idea that the President of the United States knew her name, much less wanted to meet with her, seemed impossible to comprehend. She had always understood that her work on the Eagle One project was important, but she had never imagined it would reach the attention of the highest office in the land. "Are you certain about this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The president wants to meet with me personally? Not just receive a report about the aircraft?" Captain Sterling nodded, pulling out an official-looking document with the presidential seal. "The meeting is scheduled for next Tuesday at 11 o'clock in the Oval Office. You'll be briefed by Secret Service personnel about security protocols, and you'll fly to Washington on a military transport aircraft. This is as real and as important as it gets, Sarah." The days leading up to the White House meeting passed in a blur of preparation and nervous anticipation. Sarah underwent additional security clearance procedures and was briefed extensively about presidential protocol and expectations. She studied every aspect of the Eagle One project, preparing to answer any technical questions that might arise during the meeting. The flight to Washington took place on a military transport that was itself an impressive piece of aviation technology. As Sarah looked out the window at the landscape passing below, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her from a small Texas airport to a meeting with the President of the United States. The White House was even more impressive in person than Sarah had imagined from photographs and newsreels. The security procedures were elaborate, but conducted with professional courtesy, and she was escorted through corridors lined with portraits of previous presidents and historic documents that represented the foundation of American democracy. As she waited in an anteroom outside the Oval Office, Sarah tried to calm her nerves by focusing on the technical aspects of the Eagle One project that she might be asked to discuss. She had brought a folder of documents and photographs, though she suspected that the president would already have been thoroughly briefed about the aircraft's capabilities. The door to the Oval Office opened, and an aide announced that the president was ready to see her. Sarah walked into the most famous office in America, immediately struck by the sense of history and power that seemed to emanate from every corner of the room. President Eisenhower rose from behind his desk as she entered, extending his hand in greeting with the warmth and confidence that had made him one of the most respected leaders in the world. His presence was commanding yet approachable, and Sarah could immediately understand why he had been so successful, both as a military commander and as a political leader. "Miss Martinez," the president said, his voice carrying the authority of his office while maintaining a personal warmth, "Admiral Richardson has told me remarkable things about your work on the Eagle One project. I understand that you've been instrumental in developing what may become the most advanced aircraft in the world." Sarah shook his hand, noting the firm grip and the direct eye contact that conveyed both respect and genuine interest. "Mr. President, it's an honor to meet you. The Eagle One project has been the most challenging and rewarding work of my career, and I'm proud to have contributed to its development." The president gestured for her to take a seat in one of the chairs arranged near his desk, creating an atmosphere that was more conversational than formal. "I've read the reports about your emergency landing during the demonstration. Admiral Richardson tells me that your handling of that situation was exemplary and may have prevented a significant setback to the entire program." For the next 45 minutes, President Eisenhower questioned Sarah about every aspect of the Eagle One project, from its technical capabilities to its potential applications in presidential transport. His questions were informed and insightful, demonstrating that he had thoroughly studied the project and understood its implications for national security and government operations. "Miss Martinez," the president said as their conversation neared its conclusion, "I want to discuss something with you that goes beyond the technical aspects of this aircraft. Your work on this project has brought to my attention the broader issue of opportunities for qualified individuals in critical national security roles, regardless of their background or gender." Sarah felt her pulse quicken as she realized that the conversation was about to address the very barriers she had fought against throughout her career. "Mr. President," she replied carefully, "I've always believed that the most important qualifications for any position should be competence. professionalism, and dedication to excellence. My experience has been that these qualities are not limited by traditional expectations about who can or should perform certain roles. President Eisenhower nodded approvingly at her response. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need as we move forward into an increasingly complex world. America's strength has always come from our ability to recognize and develop talent wherever we find it. And your career is a perfect example of what we can achieve when we focus on capability rather than convention. The president then made an announcement that would change not only Sarah's life but also the opportunities available to future generations of women in aviation. He was creating a new federal initiative to identify and develop exceptional pilots for critical government service, with Sarah serving as the program's first director and chief pilot. This program will ensure that the most qualified pilots, regardless of their background, have opportunities to serve in the most important aviation roles in government service, the president explained. Your experience and demonstrated excellence make you the ideal person to lead this initiative and help identify other pilots who possess similar capabilities. As Sarah left the White House that afternoon, she carried with her not only the memory of an extraordinary meeting, but also the responsibility of opening doors for others who would follow in her path. The barriers that had seemed insurmountable just a few years earlier had been broken down through persistence, skill, and the recognition that excellence transcends traditional boundaries. The journey from small-town flight instructor to presidential aviation advisor had been long and challenging, but it had proven that determination and competence could overcome even the most entrenched prejudices. Sarah Martinez had not only achieved her own dreams, but had also created possibilities for countless others who would benefit from the precedent she had established. Her story became proof that when talent meets opportunity, supported by unwavering determination and professional excellence, even the most ambitious dreams can become reality. The sky, as it turned out, truly was the limit for those brave enough to pursue their highest aspirations.